Later on in the
Miss
must have been
Bliss.
was it the 90s or the 80s? Parent Trap was remade and updated with Disney's new ingenue star.
Lindsay
Lohan.
Lohan, and we know where she is right now.
So, can we expect that there will be another version of Parent Trap in perhaps another 20 years?
With the newest star that Disney's trying to promote. I mean, it's almost like they're these film remakes are a vehicle for.
Oh, I know I have to. I wasn't going to do it, but I have to go to Cinderella. Cinderella, of course, is a fairy tale,
yes.
and Disney
Yes.
and Rodgers and Hammerstein did a musical
Right.
version of Cinderella for television in the 50s with Julie Andrews as Cinderella. So we know it was a long time ago, and was very well received, black and white. That was in the 50s, and then in the late 60s, it was made again for television in color with I've forgotten her name, Leslie Ann Warren as Cinderella. Faithful to the plot, etc., but in color, new costume, new staging. Well, in the 90s, Disney did it again.
Yeah, I remember
this
this one.
It was done again, but this time, the company that produced it was Disney-owned. It was ABC who owned it. And putting forward a Disney star, who at that time was Brandy, within the Disney stable, I believe.
Yep.
And made multicultural, so that
Whitney Houston was the fairy godmother.
And Whoopi Goldberg was the queen, etc. But what I find, this is a favorite element for me, is that when they made this television version of Cinderella for ABC, Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella for ABC, Cinderella goes to the ball. Right? Goes to the prince's ball. In all the other versions, she's worn a white dress. Very bridal, very princessy.
Very pure.
In the Brandy version, the ABC version, the dress is blue. And if you look at it very carefully, the dress that Brandy wears is a real-time, live-action version of the blue dress that Cinderella wears in Disney's animated film.
That the birds help her sew.
That the birds help her sew. Yes, that the birds help her sew.
Yes.
But the birds don't help her sew it in this one. Well, actually, the birds help her sew a dress, but then in the end, the good fairies.
So they're riffing on elements of previous versions.
It's
basically.
Disney reestablishing.
Interesting.
This is what Cinderella looks like. We own Cinderella.
The Cinderella franchise.
Right. So another one of those works that was remade, though, I think, and we need to should reference is Freaky Friday.
Yeah.
And I think here's a challenge to the class. I think it would be fun if somebody in the class would take a book that has had more than one film version and also compare the film versions.
The multiple film versions.
Because there have been 2 film versions of Charlotte's Web and 2 film versions of Freaky Friday, which are both stories. And there's probably and then of course we come to one of the greats, and you probably hate this one, and that's the multiple film versions of Little Women. When we're talking about the changes that have been made, Little Women has been filmed repeatedly. There's 3 really well-known versions, with the first one being the George Cukor version, which from the 30s, which is generally regarded as the best version. And it was refilmed again in the 40s. With the same script, even, but a different cast. So we have Katharine Hepburn as Jo, and then we have June Allison as Jo. And then it was filmed again in the 90s. In the 90s with
Winona Ryder, I believe.
Winona Ryder
was Jo.
As Jo. But the significance is the way in which the background is changed for the story, because we know that in Little Women is set during the Civil War. But when the 1946 version was made, they downplay the Civil War because America was tired from World War II.
So they had to be a little sensitive about their audience and had to eliminate some characteristics of the 1930s films that might upset people just healing from this traumatic experience of being in war.
Now,
interesting.
I remember. Now, it's funny because I've always, as I read Little Women, I made note that when I was a youth, without making note, I recognized the feminist message that could be read into Little Women. I think that Little Women will probably go the way of Jane Austen, becoming one of our key feminist texts that's studied. But that I remember noting, or recognizing the feminist nature of Jo. But it's interesting to see how in the 90s, when it was refilmed, the change in the depiction of Marmee, of the mother. In the 30s and the 40s, she's a good woman, hearth and home, noble and true. But we see more of the proto-feminist treatment of her when we get into the 90s. And these are some of the ways that films have to reflect the time in which they're made. One of the areas that I'm particularly interested in is science fiction film, and we're not going into that. I've done some analysis of science fiction films in terms of communications technologies depicted and things along those lines. But one of the points that I've made in my presentations on that is that every science fiction film tends to look more like the time in which it was made than the time it is depicting. I look at science fiction films that depict the future, and so Clockwork Orange looks more like the 70s than it does any distant future.
Sure.
Metropolis looks more like the 1920s than any distant future. And I think that we'll probably start seeing that as we look at truly the strong quality literary works for children get remade. Some other examples, as they get remade and reinterpreted, they may look, even though they're set in another time, may look more like the time in which they're made in other ways. There's been some writing about Little Lord Fauntleroy, which was done in the 20s, good family entertainment in the 20s and 30s, silent era, and then again with Ricky Schroeder, I think. I could be wrong about who played it. That's a really good example. And one of the really good examples is The Little Princess, which was Shirley Temple's first color film. And by the way, it's readily available free online. You can find it online in its full-length version. By the way, coincidentally, written by the same person who wrote Little Lord Fauntleroy, and has been filmed and filmed and filmed, even so far as to be coming out. It's coming out. I think I'm confusing it with something else. An anime, a Japanese version, and there you will find that's true with some of these other children's works that we've talked about. So that's another element.
Adaptation of an adaptation.
Adaptation of an adaptation.
Huh.
But the Little Princess, originally set in England during the Crimean War, in one of the adaptations, has been moved to the United States during, I think, World War I.
So the updating, the change of setting can be an element of adaptation.
And the change in and updating, or the movement, speaks more about the audience for whom the film is intended than the literary